So, Scott Seaton here, music director of the North State Symphony, and this is another edition of Musician Accents, a series created to give you a better idea of who exactly is playing in the North State Symphony. And today we're going to take a little time to get to know one of our violinists, Michael Eby. Michael, welcome. How are you?
Oh, thank you, Scott. I'm doing really well. Really happy to be here. How are you?
Doing very well, all things considered.
Strange time to be alive.
Oh, absolutely. I just want to very briefly mention someone very important, and that is your chair sponsor, Ruth Co. And we love our chair sponsors. They provide enormous support to the North State Symphony, and those, in addition to all of our wonderful hosts who actually put up our out-of-town musicians. We definitely could not do what we do without these very important people. So Ruth, thank you to you and your family. Thanks for being such an amazing individual. So let's backtrack a little bit. Michael, how have these past few months been treating you? How have you been able to adjust to a seemingly new way of living, if at all? I mean, what's been going on?
Well, I have to say it's been a little strange. And in some ways, I kind of feel like I'm in retirement or something. Leading up to this, I had, 3, 4, 5 auditions lined up. And of course, they've all been canceled and some have been rescheduled and canceled again. Everything else that I've been doing, pretty much any performing work has been canceled. I have been continuing with online teaching, which I'm very, very grateful for some of the platforms we have. And it's been an opportunity for my students to continue to progress despite the circumstances.
Right.
And it's kept me sane a little bit. You sit around the house too much, it can get to you. It's nice to be able to actually communicate with some people and work on some music. And I've done a couple of online projects too.
I know how that is. I mean, getting outside every day, especially now, is crucial to a balanced day, or any semblance of a balance in our days, it feels. Do you have many violin students that you're teaching virtually right now?
I actually don't have all that many at the moment. I had 3 for a long time. These days I'm down to 2. One decided she needed a little break, which is perfectly understandable. I had more before the quarantine started, but it's so hard to communicate with a lot of the younger ones. There are certain things that have to be understood, and some things can really only be shown in person. So I've sort of limited my schedule to my most advanced students.
Understandable. Well, hopefully things can get back to normal sometime in the next few months, and you don't have to worry about the challenges of breaching these online platforms, which certainly on the symphony side, that's been all we think about in the past since March at least. So let's get to know more about you. So let's start with, how long have you been associated with the North State Symphony?
Oh, that's a good question. I've been back in Reading since 2017, I think. So for the last almost 3 years or so, I've been playing regularly. And actually before that, before I left for school initially, I played a season with the North State Symphony. That would have been 2010, I believe, or possibly actually 2009, 2010 season, I think. But yeah, I had a little hiatus, and I'm very glad to be back.
Well, we're certainly glad to have you. And even further back than that, how did you get started in music, and how did you actually pick up the violin?
Well, that's a good question. It was sort of thrust upon me from the beginning. My parents actually met because my mother was giving my father violin lessons.
Really? Wow.
And I ended up starting at the ripe old age of 2. It was on and off for a long time, I have to admit, and I sort of flirted with a lot of other instruments along the way. At first, I sort of decided that the violin was far too squeaky, and I think I see what I was getting at there. So I played the cello for some time as a child, and the double bass, and went full circle. I ended up playing the euphonium for a while and some mandolin. Wow. And then, in my teenage years, I really circled back to the violin.
Mm-hmm. And where, what is your school path? Where did you go?
I went to Manhattan School of Music.
Mm-hmm. And that was for your bachelor's?
Right, bachelor's and master's, actually. I was there for 6 years.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, wow. So wow, New York for 6 years. That's a leap from Redding, California. Definitely.
It is. It's so different that it's like I never really felt like I went through a transition. I kind of just felt like I led two separate lives.
So how, when you came back in around 2017, how much of a shift in your life was that for you? And are there aspects of New York that you miss, that you wish could sort of exist where we exist?
Oh yeah, well, I certainly miss the bagels. No, it was such a wonderful opportunity in so many ways, but to be totally honest, at the end of the 6 years, I was pretty burned out.
Really?
And I mean, as much as I loved it, it's like I learned so much, and I had the greatest friends I could possibly ask for, and so many things were fantastic, but I was really exhausted at the end, and I just all I wanted to do was come home and like unwind. And I kind of feel like I'm still unwinding a little bit. It took a long time for me to sort of regain consciousness afterwards.
Wow. I mean, I know that obviously New York is a massive city, and Reading has just over 100,000 people, so that's a huge difference there. And it must be hard to exist in a place when you are there for a very focused reason, and it's also a very expensive place, and so trying to like balance all of that out, I can imagine would be very difficult, and I couldn't even imagine living there myself. I mean, it just seems, it's a place that I love to visit, but I think it would just be too busy for me otherwise. I think we're so fortunate here in California to have all of these worlds colliding together, and we can have the mountains if we want, and we can have lakes, ocean, big cities, small town, whatever we want, we have, and it's usually within just a short drive of each other too. And New York is just its own beast, it seems.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, that's I think I took a lot of that stuff granted about the Northern California community growing up here. I mean, of all the places I've gone, I don't think anywhere has quite the diversity of terrain that we have. I mean, really, you can just hop in the car and it's like, we've got two beautiful lakes up here and two like stunning mountains. It's like whatever you want, you have, or you can drive down to the city if you want to.
Exactly. But of course, New York it does have things like Metropolitan Opera, New York Philharmonic, which is not my favorite orchestra, but they're good orchestra nonetheless.
They get the job done.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many other top-notch ensembles to experience, and I living in Boston, I caught a little bit of that. It's a much smaller city, obviously, but I loved having a moment in my life where I could go to a major orchestra a couple blocks away one day, and then several different orchestras the next few days. It's that was something that in retrospect was really great to be around for a while.
Yeah, it is so amazing. You can just hop on the one train and go down there, and it's like every great artist in the world comes through New York at some point. Even every great orchestra. It's like if they go on tour, obviously they come through and play Carnegie Hall or Avery Fisher, or I guess they call it David Geffen now. But it's amazing. I mean, I got to hear so many great orchestras. I got to hear the LSO. I got to hear Philadelphia, Cleveland. I mean, it's everything is there if you want to see it.
Did you ever get to see Berlin when they came through New York?
I didn't. That's the one I've not been able to catch. Heartbreaking. Someday.
Oh, I mean, hopefully they'll tour again sometime soon. But even then, I think they come to the West Coast when they do US tour. I'm not sure, but
I'm sure they'll put the Cascade Theater on their schedule.
Is there a particular moment in your life or a singular experience that sort of solidified, I have to do music? Was there one thing that did it for you, or was it just a compilation of small events or small experiences? Or
there were a few smaller experiences that led up to one very clear defining moment. In my earlier high school years, I really was more geared towards being an athlete than a musician. Oddly enough, really? I know you'd never guess looking at me now, but I kind of lived in the gym for the first couple of years in high school, but I did play some violin, and I did a few interesting things. One of which was I went to this chamber music festival up in Arcata. It's at Humboldt State University called Sequoia Chamber Music Workshop. And I was actually lucky enough to be coached there by our wonderful concertmaster, Terry Bond. Small world.
Yeah.
And that was a really interesting experience.
Is that when you met Terry?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And that festival, basically, you're assigned a different piece of chamber music every day and perform it that night. So a little bit of trial by fire, a lot of variety. And that was fun, but it wasn't quite, at least the first time I went, it wasn't like the defining moment. But it was very shortly afterwards. I remember I was just about to go on a road trip with my mom to San Diego, and I found around the house this CD of the Sibelius Violin Concerto. And that poor woman, I had the third movement on loop for the entire 12-hour drive.
When was this? What year was this?
This would have been, I think probably 2007, something like that. So
that's when you discovered Sibelius?
Yeah, and there was something about that piece, just the breadth of expression. I didn't realize up to that point what music was actually capable of. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm sure I didn't fully realize it in that moment either, or maybe never will. But there was something about it. It was such a striking experience. I really felt like after hearing that, I was never the same person, and there was nothing else I could possibly have done with my life.
No, I love that story because, I don't know if you knew this, but Sibelius is an iconic composer for my upbringing. And I will never forget, it was just a couple years earlier than that, in 2005, when I first heard his music, specifically his Fifth Symphony. And I was just completely just blown away listening to this 33-minute work. And at the end, it's everything changes from this very horizontal, thick, dense textural piece to these several sharp vertical chords with silence in between all of them, just thrown in your face. And I thought it was just the most incredible pulling out of the rug that I've ever experienced in music. And I had been hooked on his music ever since. Even wrote my dissertation on his Fifth Symphony, which I hope to do in North State in the next 2 or 3 years. So yeah, Sibelius. And then, I didn't even discover the Violin Concerto until several years. Well, not several years, but a few years after that. And what a powerful piece of music. And, he was such a perfectionist. I don't know if you knew this, but he wrote most or all of a second violin concerto that he then destroyed because it wasn't up to the bar that he had created for himself with the first violin concerto. And I wish I could have heard whatever was in that concerto. But
I didn't know there was another. It's heartbreaking.
Oh yeah, seriously. And talk about a guy who is able to create these intense moods. No one is able to create such an organic sort of recreation of the world around them, to me, than
I feel
John
the same
Sibelius.
way. Like, there's something about the development section of the Violin Concerto first movement. It, like, every time I just get this, and I'm not a person that usually has like images for music for everything, but for this, it's like all I see is some kind of storm coming in on the sea, like the coast of Finland or something. It just, I don't know. I feel like I have a vivid image of the eye of the storm too, when the whole violins ascending into D flat major and all that.
I mean, in the concerto, going from just that such soft chord in the beginning with the alternation in the first and second violins, and then this line that just blossoms as just, it's like the beginning of the earth itself, and then just morphs into this incredibly difficult, treacherous journey for the violin that at times was nearly, and at first it was unplayable. But that's how far violinists have come since then. Very similar to how Stravinsky wrote what he thought was unplayable for the Rite of Spring, that initial solo, and then violinists like, we're up for the challenge. Let's bring it on. But amazing how, because of trying to create something so earthy, composers are actually moving the technical prowess of all the players for generations. I mean, I think that's pretty incredible. Along those lines, do you have a favorite composer?
That's a tough question for me. Depends on what week you ask me, I guess. But I can narrow it down to my favorite genre. Okay. I really love everything from the early 20th century. Pretty much anything from about 1900 to like 1970s. I just think it's the most fascinating point in music history for me, where it's like every single composer comes in and they're trying to destroy everything that came before and create their own language. And it's like none of it ever really stuck. So we just end up with this completely diverse array of things. Like everyone invented their own language and defined their own expression in so many different ways. And I never get sick of hearing it.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, actually, how so much changed within, several blocks of years. It's almost as if composers were in their own Cold War with each other, but all going toward the same goal. And that, we arrived at some pretty incredible things once you get past all the craziness of the post-tonal world and all of that stuff. And even then, there were some really cool pieces that happened as a result. But I can't largely say that much of that has stuck on. I mean, it has here and there, but how many 12-tone pieces have you played?
That's true. Not so many. I did the Berg Adagio for violin, clarinet, and piano. There are a few 12-tone moments in Bartók's Second Violin Concerto, but it's not actually a 12-tone piece.
Well, I have just one more question for you today, and in your few years with the symphony, especially since you got back in 2017, do you have maybe a most memorable concert with us that you've done?
Oh, that's good. There's a couple that come to mind. Okay. One of which I have to say is the Firebird, and not only because of the scream. But there's one line, I mentioned it to him at some point. In the Infernal Dance, there's this trumpet line that Ian played. The da 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 da. I just remember the way he played it. It was so striking to me. It was like a laser shooting out of his trumpet or something. It was so perfectly clear. I still think about it every now and again. Nice. It's like every time I play a Martellet stroke on the violin, that's what I want to come out.
Oh, nice. I'm glad
I haven't gotten it yet, but
okay. So Firebird, obviously I'm a fan of that concert too. You said there might be another that came to mind.
Another one that is coming to mind is when Evan Kahn came to play the Elgar cello concerto. That felt like a special concert to me. Did we do Tchaikovsky's Fifth on that as well?
Elgar. I think that was Tchaikovsky. Yes, it was.
But I just remember his presence in the hall as a soloist was so, and I know that's as much about him as it is about us. I of course enjoyed playing in the orchestra for that concert, but getting to hear him in person and like the way his sound felt, especially in that encore, was like the kind of whisper that reverberates everywhere. I don't know. I just felt like that was a really special experience.
Yeah, that is a deep piece of music, and to have that on the same concert as Tchaikovsky, really any Tchaikovsky is I just have to take it catch my breath thinking about it. But yeah, what an emotional roller coaster that is. I mean, almost as intense as a concert of a Mahler symphony, I'd say. I mean, Tchaikovsky was just someone who was so torn and so troubled a lot of his life, and especially when you get to the last few symphonies, the fifth and the sixth. I mean, the fifth is obviously more upbeat and lively than, say, the ending of the Sixth Symphony, but
still pretty heavy by any mortal standards.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that was a great concert, and Evan played. He really owned that concerto. He has such a beautiful and really rich depth to his sound, and I hope we can have him back at some point. And maybe hear,
it's almost
maybe
hypnotic in a way.
Oh yeah, maybe hear like a Dvorak cello concerto or something like that.
It's funny. I've actually run into him a few times because I went down to audition for Opera San Jose, and it turns out he's the personnel manager there.
Oh really? I didn't know.
So
that.
He was the one running the auditions there, so I got to talk to him a little bit, and I've been going down there to sub every now and again. So it's nice to see a familiar face down there.
Oh yeah, he's a great guy, very talented cellist, and he's principal cellist there too, I believe. Or no,
yes,
sorry,
yes, he is principal cello and personnel manager.
Oh, he is, okay, because I know he's also principal of Symphony Silicon Valley, and wow, he's doing a lot then.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, it was so great to have a few minutes to chat with you, and to give everyone who is at least part of our social media crowd to get a glimpse into your life. And thank you for taking a moment out of your day and talking with me.
Oh, thanks so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure, and thank you to Ruth Coe so much. It's an honor to share a spot on the program with you.
Oh, absolutely. All of our sponsors are amazing. Ruth, so grateful. And I certainly cannot wait to be back in the Cascade Theater and in Laxon Auditorium making music as a full ensemble. And I hope that we can find the means to get there as quickly as possible.
I certainly hope so too.
Yeah. Well, Michael, again, thank you so much. And we look forward to, I look forward to working with you again in the near future. And be safe. Hope you and your family stay well through all of this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, likewise. Stay healthy, and I'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you,
Hopefully.
Michael.